All right, everybody, welcome to the Unraveler Show with William Vincent and myself doing this series together. Bro, again, if you are watching, I seriously, this technology is kicking my ass. I am super frustrated. I do not understand why every episode that I have prepared in YouTube does not want to link up with my Zoom. If anybody can figure out what is going on that knows what's going on, please let me know. I would really appreciate it because yeah, I keep trying. It's just every week I have to go to a different link and do a live from a whole different way. So it's frustrating because you're supposed to be able to click the live thing and then click the from another broadcast and you put in the information. And yeah, William and I had to connect on a second Zoom call, and I was able to enter the information, but it still didn't want to present on YouTube. So please, if anybody is watching that knows how to fix this, I would really appreciate it because it's very frustrating to me and those who are watching, and I'm sure William as well, because we waste the first 14 minutes of our time trying to figure out this technology. So that is very frustrating. Anyway, that is my plea. That is my beg. Please help me. I am super frustrated. Anyway, William, unless that's you to help me right now, then just how you doing tonight other than that?
I'm doing pretty well. I just kind of laugh, and I I'm a mental health counselor, so this might be the appropriate way to start this session. Tell me about your frustrations.
So tonight, William and I are not actually going to do round five. We are going to have a mental health counseling session live,
Practice some deep breathing here.
live on YouTube. This is great. So that's it. That's what the show is about, mental health counseling. Uh, Um, anyway, tonight's show is actually supposed to be about whether or not Christianity is what was the deal? I can't even remember because I'm at a blank right now.
Uh,
Responsible.
I think the way that the chapter is titled, and I don't have it in front of me, is the false statement would be that religion is an attempt to explain unexplained phenomena. Essentially, I don't remember exactly how I worded it. That's essentially the gist of it.
Right. Okay, that's it. So before we get into that, William, I just want to so last week we had a glorious moment for me anyway, where you admitted that you can't know for certain that God exists. That was just really amazing because that's for me, that's really the driving force of all of this that I'm doing. I just want Christians to admit that because that's huge, at least in my opinion, because if you can't know for certain 100% that God exists, then what are you banking your life on? Um, and your thought and response was it's very similar to mine, where you just are choosing one way to live versus what I'm choosing, even though neither one of us can be certain about anything. And that's fair. And I can roll with that because I'm like, sure, okay. But I'm also, unlike Christians, not banking my life on some certainty or some hope, nor am I, for example, um, living a life with this idea that I will have some relationship with the Easter Bunny someday, because I just hope that he's real, even though I can't know for certain. And I also don't pray to an invisible friend, hoping that he's real, even though I don't know for certain. So these are all the responses that I would have to how we ended that show because I know we didn't have much time at the end there. We just kind of like landed and then had to go. But especially the prayer thing, that would be a big question for me, for you. How you would respond to that because if you're praying to this God that you don't actually know exists for certain, what exactly are you praying to and for? Since if you don't know he's for certain, how do you even know what he's about or whether he even answers prayers? Like this is all up in the air for me. I'm very curious about that answer, and then I want to read you something because I'm curious about your response to that. But I'll start with that so I don't like just keep hitting you with a bunch of questions.
No, and that's a pretty big question. Why do we pray? Um, and I do think prayer probably does take us into the idea of religion, and what it's about, what it's for. Um, and I think there's a lot of different definitions of what prayer is, and what you're trying to do with prayer. there's different ways to pray. I used to be, you know, when I was a child, I was raised in a Pentecostal type denomination, and prayer there was about sort of having this sort of uh, ecstatic experience. There's an idea of talking to God. There's the idea of prayer sort of as a form of ritual and worship or interaction with God. So I think when we talk about prayer, we probably should recognize there's a lot of different ways that people pray, and then if we go outside of just the Christian religion, then we can see various ways that people pray, and I think it connects into a broader sort of topic for me of just sort of this existential engaging with the universe, engaging with truth, engaging with myself, quite frankly. So the question I suppose was why do I pray if I don't know for sure, um, if I don't know for certain that what I'm praying to is effective. And I think when we say we don't know, um, we say we don't know in the same way that we don't know what dark energy and dark matter is, and we don't have any scientific way to define what it is. We can theorize that it exists, but we really don't even have any proof that it exists. So we don't know that dark matter and dark energy exist, but physicists believe that it is probably more prevalent in the universe than the matter and the energy that we can see. So when I say I don't know, what I don't know doesn't make anything real or not real. It deals with the limits of my ability to perceive and to understand and measure. So I don't have a way from where I stand today as a finite human being to tell you that I can put a tape measure and tell you there's a Geiger counter and I can say this is God. I can prove that. I don't know in that way, but I can perceive and intuit that that's a reality. Now, the question again is, why do you pray? Why do you act in this way if you can't 100% prove that the thing that you're praying to or the thing you're trying to interact with is a reality? I think there are several answers to that question. I think one of those questions, and I think probably the most important question is how prayer affects me personally, how what it does for my personal existence and my personal experience of life. I think that's where it starts. I was originally drawn to the Eastern Orthodox faith because when I studied religions, I very quickly lost interest or became disenchanted with religions that were totally ideological, totally about I know this, and this affirmation of ideologies and lists of concepts, and I was drawn to Eastern religions in general because Eastern religions, it's often said it's not so much about what do I believe, but what do I practice. And for me, life has a rhythm, it has a structure to it, it has ritual to it, it has custom to it. And for me, prayer is touching, essentially, this is not the only answer to that question, but this is probably one of the first and most important. Prayer is touching, to me, reality. It's touching truth. It's touching the things I think that are most true about life and about the universe. Now, when I say that, you may think, well, you may think of that in a typical religious concept of things like the sort of things people say in the Christian religion, affirmation. But to me, it's even more basic than that. Things like that life has meaning, that time has meaning, that my life has a purpose, that this day, not to, pin roses on myself, but I start every day with prayer. I start every day with a sort of type of prayer. And it's not just because I feel like I'm going to get some sort of reward or something's going to fall out of the sky to give, but because I'm aligning my mind, my spirit, myself with the things that I think are most true in the universe. And that this is not the only time I'm praying during the day, but that my entire day, everything that I do should have this same sort of essence of meaning, purposefulness, and uh, living in according to the nature of and the reality of the world around me. So that's one of the answers to that. Why do you do that? Because it to me is the pinnacle and the essence of living a life in truth. So I will start with that answer there. And the second part of that is I do believe, and this is empirically provable, that the act of prayer, the act of prayer changes the way our brains function. It helps to rewire, and it activates parts of our brain that seem to almost be particularly able to interact with that sort of mental phenomena. It's a very biological description, but in other words, that was a very scientific way of saying because it affects me in a positive way. I pray because I'm affected by it positively. And thirdly, and I think this is equal. All these things are not one more important to the other to me. Thirdly, I do believe in God. I believe God exists, and therefore I believe I don't know that God exists. I don't have a measurement that says God exists, but my heart, my intuition, my mind calls me to believe God exists. So I pray because I do believe that God exists. So I believe God exists. I pray because of that. I pray because it aligns me to what I think is truth. And I pray because it has an absolute physiological positive effect on who I am as a person. So there's my answer. There's the 3 points I'll start with to answer that question.
Hmm. So, so I don't pray to dark matter. I don't pray to energy. I don't pray to anything that I don't know exists. In fact, I don't pray to anything or anybody simply because the only person I would pray to is a God, assuming he did exist. And I would have to know for certain because if he's not going to actually do anything and doesn't actually exist, I'm just kind of wasting my breath. Or hoping at best that he might exist. I mean, I suppose this is like some guy laying out in a war field somewhere in the middle of nowhere in the trenches that doesn't believe in anything and just says, "Hey, if there's anybody out there, I'm gonna pray to you and hope that you save me." Okay, I mean I mean that's a sheer guess at best that there's gonna be some lucky thing out there that's gonna save me. I mean, you might as well pray to the Lucky Charms guy, to ask him to bring you cereal. I mean, I don't know. I just it's just weird. Like it. So, I mean, it sounds like to me what you're talking about is meditation, um, which actually answers all of the three reasons you have to pray. It's just without meditation, you don't need a God for it. And you're talking to a being that you're not 100% sure exists. That's it. I guess that's all I can say about it. It's
Well,
just,
it's a complicated topic in itself. I mean, when you talk about prayer, because it's complicated because even people who don't believe that God exists would still say, particularly people in the fields of human psychology, neuroscience would say, even if God does or doesn't exist, the activity of prayer, and we would probably would include some forms of meditation into that, does have a positive effect on us, even if it's not, even if we don't believe that a God exists. So there's and we could, so if I were an atheist, if I were going to say, explain
so
this,
I'm sorry, but I hear what you're saying. Like, okay, so in theory, there's a person who prays just to throw out, they might call it throwing out a prayer to the universe or whatever. And they're just hoping that the universe hears them and energy goes their way. I mean, okay, so that's fine. But um, that person is, well, unless they're mentally unstable, that person's well aware that they're just throwing a prayer out to the universe and they're not speaking to a personal being that they're trying to have a relationship with. You, on the other hand, are claiming that you are praying to a God, a specific person that you're trying to have a relationship with, even though you're claiming you don't know for sure that he exists. That's where I'm finding the barrier. I'm confused by that.
Sure. And I'm equally confused about from my side is why in this one particular instance, in this question about the existence of God, there's this certain particular criterion that atheists will put forward. You know, you need to show this, you have to have that, or anything you do beyond that makes no rational sense. But there are so many other aspects of life that is not the criterion for that we accept things all the time, very important and foundational things to human existence that we don't have that sort of absolute proof for, and we act as though they are true because our intuitions, our hearts, our minds tell us that they're true. And so that's confusing to me. Now, if you're an atheist and you don't believe in God and you see no value in prayer, that's fine. I don't need you to do that to make me feel better or worse. But if we're going to say my belief in God is less rational and less intellectual and less existentially founded than the disbelief in God, that's where we're going to start having the disagreement, because then you're appealing to a set of criteria that is not consistently applied. Again, if you don't believe in God, that's fair enough, because the way I'm framing it, I can't say you're less rational than me. I can't say but you can't say that I'm less rational than you. This does come down to about how we're experiencing things. Now, I will add to that, sometimes I don't know that we're being exactly honest, and I will throw this at atheists. I don't know that you're being absolutely 100% honest about human existentiality, not God, not some sky daddy, and not spaghetti monster, but human existentiality, how we actually do live as human beings, because we're not Vulcans from Star Trek. We are not emotionless mechanisms. We are emotional, believing, intuitive type creatures. And so I believe in God, and I believe in God because of intuitive, deductive. I really don't believe in God because of deductive arguments. That's the reason I'm not into intelligent design, because if it were just deductive arguments, I probably would just be an agnostic. I'm not an agnostic because something about reality, not the end of an equation, but the engagement of it speaks to me and says rationality, will, and purpose, and therefore I live that way. So when we're saying you just react this way, because no, I react this way because of the same what reason people react to all manner of things in the same way.
So, I would say that that I do think your view is far less rational than mine. I will say that, and atheism in general. Um, Part of the reason is
But you would have to say that, and you'd have to explain to me a lot of things that you believe to be true that
okay.
you can't prove in the same way you want me to prove that God's true.
So first of all, the reason I would say it's less rational is for what you said a minute ago, and it sounded like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounded like your reason was, well, there isn't a better explanation, so God. That's what you said. But
No, no, I haven't. I've never said that. Not even one time in my 48 years on the planet have I ever said that. That's not a good answer to
that's
anything.
what you said a few minutes. I mean, not in the exact same words, but you said there is no better explanation for all of these thoughts and feelings and emotions, so therefore I believe in God. That was essentially what
That's
you said.
not the same. That statement, there's not a better explanation, so God is not the same as saying God is the best explanation for everything. It's not the same. Those are two different
That's
statements.
exactly the same thing. I don't have a better explanation, therefore God's the best explanation.
No, it's not the best. Okay, for instance, if we're in court and we're asking a jury to determine what the truth is, that's what the word verdict means in Latin. It means tell the truth. Evidence is presented, and the jury is asked to say which answer that these two scenarios are going to be painted. One's going to say this guy's innocent, one says guilty, and the jury has to say, based on what we do know, this is the best answer. Were they there? No. Do we have a video of it happening? No, maybe not sometimes. But the point being is, if it was, they are asked to make a decision and tell the truth, a verdict of which answer is the best answer. And so when I say I don't know for sure, I mean intellectually, my brain cannot grasp. There are things I don't know. There are probably infinite things that I'll always not know. But the best answer for things is God. That's not the same thing as saying I don't know the answer, therefore God. And this is
That's
probably leading
what
us
you're
right
saying,
into the.
bro.
This is
That's exactly what you're saying, though. You're saying we don't have any other explanation that makes any sense, and the best answer we do have is God. So I'm going to roll with God. That's exactly what you're saying, bro. 100%.
if that was what I was saying, then the opposite conclusion would be we don't have any other answer for this phenomenon, so we're going to reject this answer. Why?
What? No, not at all.
Okay,
Because
let me restate it
if
so it
you
makes sure it's
if you
clear.
if
So
you
if I'm
actually if God actually was the best explanation, then you would have definitive reasons for that explanation, and you've already admitted there are no definitive reasons for God, so we don't know 100%.
no,
You're
no, I said I don't. We
on one
don't.
side of your mouth, you're saying, I don't really have any proof of God. Nobody can prove it for sure. We don't know for certain. We also don't have any other better explanations. So my reason is God's the best explanation I can come up with, therefore God. That's exactly what you've said in these last two
No,
episodes.
you're saying different things, slightly different things than what I'm saying that are not what I'm saying. And you could take anybody's statements and change them slightly and make them untrue. What I'm saying is that in following the thought process back to earlier, there are multitudes of things that we experience in existence all the time as human beings that we accept them not marginally, but we base our life off. You use that word, base. We base our life off of them that would not meet the criteria that you're asking me to give you for the existence of God.
Well, like,
So
what
yeah,
would be
you
an
can
example?
eliminate God. You can eliminate God and say
What's
I
an
don't
example
believe
of
in
that,
God.
bro? I need an example. You can't just
Okay.
say, I need an example.
Um, we've talked about things like let's say we're going to mow down Stonehenge and we're going to put a Walmart there. Is that right or wrong? Should we do that or not?
I don't know. What?
Okay, I'm just asking your opinion. I'm going to buy the property for Stonehenge. I'm going to take all the stones out. I don't know, we'll make a swimming pool out of that, and then we'll put a Walmart there. Is that right or wrong?
I don't really have a right or wrong answer to that. Boy, there's so many variables I would need to consider in this decision. It's not a right or wrong answer.
But if I were to ask you today and you were the person who could veto or approve that decision, what would you say?
The same exact thing I just said. I need a lot more information.
Okay, it's just a Walmart, nothing special about it. I just happen to like building Walmarts, and that's a good space for me to build one. That's the whole context. Would it be okay?
I, I, I mean, whether I say yes or no, I'd be curious as to what your answer was. So let's hypothetically go both ways because I'd like to see what your answer is going to be whichever way I go because I'm curious how this has any bearing on our conversation. So let's say I say yes first. What's
Okay.
your
All right. So you say yes, it's okay for us to build the Walmart and eliminate Stonehenge, right?
okay?
Okay. So at that point in time, there's no value there. And what's happening in the Middle East right now is at times like terrorist groups like ISIS have went in and absolutely destroyed thousands and 100,000-year-old artifacts, architecture, and most people would say that's wrong. They shouldn't do that. There's something immoral about that. I agree. I think it would be ignorant and immoral to take something that's so valuable to humanity and destroy it for
Yeah,
something so
I imagine
invaluable.
I figured that's where you were going with this. I'm just trying to understand. I guess I'm not smart enough to see where you're connecting this. I'm waiting
Okay,
to see your outcome of it.
sure. But Stonehenge is just it's a place you could build a Walmart. There's
Okay.
nothing about the rock or the dirt or the shape of the rocks on the dirt that make it anything.
Okay.
Okay. But it's valuable. There's something there. There's something valuable, more valuable than a Walmart.
Maybe.
Okay.
Depends on
And,
who you are.
you could say no. You could say, well, I don't agree with that. I think
I mean,
we
that's
should.
not an intrinsic statement, William. You can't just say intrinsically that's more valuable. It's not intrinsically more valuable. If our society collapsed and the only thing that would make our civilization survive was putting a fucking Walmart there, then by all means that Walmart becomes far more valuable
Okay, but why would that be more valuable?
because it's the only thing that would make our civilization survive. That's why.
What law of the universe says that's a good thing?
No law. We decide as a civilization, we decide as a human race, hey, we need to live, so this is our best choice.
So you believe something you have no proof for.
What do you mean I have no proof for it?
You
Every
just
evolution proves this.
wait a minute now. You
Survival of
just
the
said
fittest proves this.
evolution does not. Okay,
It absolutely
please allow me to discuss. Evolution does not. Okay, let me show you something.
natural selection proves this. Like
It doesn't.
whatever is needed
That
most
is
is
not
what
that
you
is not
do.
how natural selection works. Natural selection is not progressive.
All right, well, we're getting off track. Fine, whatever. I'm still trying to understand your connection here. Whether Walmart's more valuable or keeping Stonehenge is more valuable. What is
Okay.
your goal here? What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, you
I tell you what. I tell you what. Tell me what you believe is the right answer is, so that we can get to your point. I just really want to know what your goal is here.
well, I think we did. We you said that if and you gave an alternative scenario, and I think that's a fair one. You said if a, building a Walmart there was the only thing to save humanity, then that would justify. Now that's pretty heavy, weighty statement. So in other words, we could destroy this thing if this other thing happened. Both of those things imply value.
I mean, if humanity died, what difference would Stonehenge matter anyway?
I don't know. And if we all died,
But
a species of cockroach might evolve to fly to we don't know.
we
So
don't care about cockroaches.
they
We care about humans.
right, which is we have no empirical reason for.
Sure, we do.
We don't.
Yes, we're humans and we care about humans. That's why.
Cares. Why would we care? It doesn't matter. Some humans
Because
don't.
we're humans. That's why it matters.
Okay,
What
some
reason do you
humans
have?
don't.
God created us. That's going to be your reason.
No, it's just a reality. I'm not trying to create a reason and then develop reality to meet the reason. I'm looking at reality and
And
determining
the reality
the
is
reason.
humans care about the human race. That's reality. You don't need a God for that.
Well, let's ask that. You asked the question. You said if a Walmart would preserve the human race, then we should do it. And you introduced, and I said, what law says that? And you said there's no law that says that. But you still, even in this hypothetical absurd scenarios, I get it. But in this hypothetical absurd scenario, there is a point where you would be willing to act based on something that you can't prove empirically. You don't do, and we can make that okay. Why shouldn't I just steal from people? Why shouldn't I, if I get angry with somebody, why shouldn't I harm them? Or that may even be a good example. Let's just say, why shouldn't I just randomly go out in the street right now and run over somebody with a car? Why shouldn't I do that? And if I did that, is that wrong? Is that right? What would you think? Is it wrong or right, or do you think it has moral value at all?
Well, I mean, what I think in this moment is beside the point. Like we can discuss that in a minute. I'm still trying to see what your connection here is to the existence
Right,
of
because what I said was I said that you accept things as true, and you
okay.
do, and you just confirmed that you did. You said I believe in this scenario that this value is assigned to this act, but I
But
don't have a reason for it.
I'm not making an absolute statement. I'm not saying this is absolutely correct. I'm saying here we are in the universe, and because we are a human race and we like to live, we're going to make this decision in all likelihood, and everybody's going to agree that if this is going to be the best chance we have to survive, we're all just going to be like, yeah, good, let's do it. Nobody's going to argue that because if they do, then they're all dead. Like that's a stupid decision. That doesn't require morality for it. It also doesn't require the existence of God for it. It just requires common sense or law or
Yeah,
anything like that. Just common sense. Like I'm still trying to understand what your connection here is back to proving the existence of God. Like I'm lost here, dude. Where are you
sure.
going?
But it feels like to me at this point in time that you're not willing to own the fact that you have a value system,
I do have a value system. I never said I didn't. That is a value system. I didn't
and
say
you have a
about
value
value.
system.
You asked me for a law and proof. I said I have a this is value is different. If you ask me of a value system, that's totally, you did not ask me about a
Okay,
value.
fair enough. We won't call it a law. We'll call it a value system.
Fine. The value
Okay.
system. Great. I have a value system.
And that's something that you do live your life based on,
Sure.
but you have no empirical proof for it.
Do I need empirical proof?
You do for God, you say.
But God's a different story. Why do I need, I don't pray to my value system.
Okay, so follow me here.
Pray to
So
God.
in this one category, this is what I said to start with. In one category, you have this criteria. You don't need to prove you act, but you believe you live based on beliefs here. But it's wrong for me to do the same thing here,
I
but
didn't
there's
say it
no
was
reason
wrong.
for the difference.
I did not say it was wrong. I said it was nuts. I didn't say it was wrong.
Nuts
I
is
said
a
there's no
nuts
reason
is just
for
a
it.
colloquial way to say it's wrong.
No, it's not wrong. Dude, wrong and right. That is so different. Like it is like it is not wrong for you to continue to pray to an invisible friend. I have no problem with that. You do what you want, but I'm just saying, what is the value in that? Is what I'm asking you. And you gave me some of these other things, and I said that's called meditation. I don't see why you're still talking to a friend you call God when you don't absolutely know he exists. And then we went on a trail. Well, yeah, but I just believe he exists. And I'm like, okay, well, why do you believe he exists? What's the point of that? Why are you like continuing to live your life for God and hoping that you're going to live with him
Sure.
and know him and whatever?
Yeah. And the problem is when I give an explanation as to why, the follow up from yourself and from other people who call themselves atheists is, well, you believe in something but you can't prove it, as though you can't.
No, no. See, right now, off the bat, dude, that is such a wrong statement. And I'll tell you why. If you want to ask me, Alan Bondar, if I believe certain things, I'm all for it. If you're going to ask me as Alan Bondar, the atheist, I'm going to say, bro, you're already off point because I do not believe anything as an atheist. That's what I keep trying to tell you. This is where I feel like your book was way off track. A lot of the things you said in your book were on point when it comes to belief systems of people. But as far as your attack on atheists and atheism, it has no bearing on the conversation because as an atheist, I am literally here at ground zero, and somebody came along and said, "Oh, God exists." And I said, "Oh, shit. What do you mean God exists?" And you said, "Oh, because of blah, blah, blah." And I said, "On what grounds? There's no proof for it. So I'm just going to remain here." And you said, "Oh, you're an atheist." I said, "Okay, I guess I'm an atheist." And you said, "Now prove God doesn't exist." And I'm like, "Why do I need to prove God doesn't exist? I have no reason to even believe he exists to begin with." Like this is the dilemma that we're facing as atheists is everybody seems to think that because I have no stance on any one of these claims that people make that therefore I have some belief system. I don't. Atheism is literally a a a non-belief in all the claims that people make about things that exist that do not actually exist. That's it. I make no other further projections or claims about anything. Now, as a human being, I step outside of that, obviously, and I have beliefs about a lot of things. But as an atheist, I have no claims, no beliefs about anything. It is simply the rejection of a claim that you made. That's it. Otherwise, I would have no reason to be an atheist.
Sure, and a rejection of a claim is still a position and it's
No,
still
it's
a
not.
claim.
No, it's
It really is.
it's not.
In every discipline known to man that's respected to have any sort of integrity, a rejection of a claim is still a claim. It still is. And
All right,
there's multitudes
so
of
I
ways.
come to you and I say, "Hey, I believe Santa Claus exists. Therefore, prove that Santa Claus doesn't exist." And you're like, "Oh, well, I don't really need to because there's no evidence for it." And I said, "Ha ha, you just made a claim. You were absolutely
I did. I absolutely. I would made a claim at that moment that I don't. I believe that statement is false, and that is absolutely a claim. And I would definitely have burden responsibility for burden of proof of that claim. Yes.
Wow, seriously?" So every single time somebody comes along and makes up some invention and some belief system, you now also have the responsibility to prove them wrong.
Yes, that's called rationality.
Oh, that's insane, dude. That's absolutely insane.
It's the opposite of insane. It's
And
called
also, it's not a
rationality.
belief system. You are
No,
not responsible to just jump on ship because everybody that makes a claim says something is provable when they have no proof for it. You don't have to jump on that ship and suddenly develop a whole like I've heard you make this idea that atheists have a worldview now because somebody claimed that God exists. I have no worldview about that more than I do about Easter Bunny existing or the spaghetti monster. Like I have no worldviews about these things. I literally just have no reason to believe them. Zero.
but
I'm
that's a worldview.
it's
It's still a
not a
worldview.
worldview, man.
It really is. That's exactly the definition of a worldview.
So if I have a worldview, my worldview is I don't have any worldviews. That's my worldview.
That's like saying every answer is correct, even or if everybody's belief is correct, even the belief that everybody's belief is not correct is correct. That's impossible. It's called irrational. There are entire disciplines of epistemology that deal with this. The rejection of a claim, and you can put this on the stone on my tombstone. The rejection of a claim is itself a claim, and there's no logical or rational way around that. Now, if I were an atheist, I would say, yes, I have a worldview and I reject the existence of God, and these are the reasons why I reject that. I don't know why atheists just don't say that. I don't know why there's this
All right. So
battle to
one
just
plus one
deny
plus
that.
1 plus 7 equals 55. That's now you go and prove that that's not true. If you can't prove it, then I'm absolutely right.
Well, I'm not very good at math, but I know mathematicians that could prove that you're wrong. So,
How? How can they possibly prove it?
based on mathematics, the
Oh,
system
you
of
don't
truth,
have all the math that I have. I have math you don't know.
well, then you need to demonstrate that.
No, I don't need
I'll
to. I
listen
have
to your counterclaim.
I have faith. It's yours to prove that my faith isn't accurate.
Oh, now you've added a different thing. First
Oh
of all,
no, 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 it's no, no, it's faith, and you can't prove empirically that my faith is wrong. So therefore, 1 plus 7 equals 55.
you're appealing to a different system there, aren't you?
That's called Christianity 101, bro. That's exactly what you're doing.
Christianity isn't 1 plus 7 equals 55.
It's dude, my point is that my whole claim is, oh, I just have faith. You can't prove it empirically that it's wrong, so you just have to believe me.
But what you're doing and what I'm leading you
And you have
into
a
there
whole
is
worldview now because you can't prove it.
if you're using mathematics as an example of what Christianity is false because it doesn't add up. You have just made a claim, and it is a worldview, and that's fine. That's fine. You're welcome to. You're a rational person. You're welcome to be an intelligent person. Listen to me, Alan. Tell all the other atheists out there, help them out. Stop fighting this. You guys have a worldview. You don't have identically same worldviews. You guys are welcome to have different variations of this, but you do. You have a view of the world. And I think here's the problem. And I think I really know why there's a resistance here, because it does open the door for me to say, then if you have a worldview and you believe things that you can't absolutely prove, but the evidence seems to be contrary to the other position, then what's the problem with me making the same sort of position? Now, here's the thing I would say. I think the answer to that question is there isn't a problem. And what that would leave us with, if you really think about this, is me respecting the fact that you don't believe in God and you're not an idiot and you're not trying to destroy the world and eat babies. And that you would have to say the same thing about me, that you're not an idiot and you're not, well, maybe I am an idiot, but not because of this. If we would just, this part of this discussion where we're denying the conclusions and the thought processes of other people, we talked about last week that whether religion is the source of all these wars. I don't think it is, but I think this sort of, I see something, and if you don't see what I see, then there's something wrong with you, and I'm going to bully you and force you and beat you up until you see what I see. I think no matter whether I'm a Christian or an atheist or a Buddhist or a Hindu, that thought process is wrong. And I think we need to step away from that. Okay. And then we can actually start talking about after we resolve to the idea that it's okay for people to disagree. It's okay for people to live different lives. Alan, as long as you're not, burning my house down or, destroying my car, stealing it and going to Florida without me, because I'd like to go to Florida with you if you steal my car. But anyway, just joking. But as long as you're not hurting me, I care about you and I do care what you believe in some sense, because I'm not disrespecting you or marginalizing. But your choice to live your life is something that belongs to you, and I don't need to manipulate you into agreeing with me. Okay. And I do think at some point we need to stop denying the fact that none of us have the absolute answer to these questions, and that we need to respect other people's thought processes on them.
What is your mandate or goal as a Christian if it's not to evangelize the lost? I don't understand. What's your point, dude? What are you living for?
To be the best person I can be.
So the Bible's command to preach the gospel has no bearing on you whatsoever.
Yes, it does.
How
but
so? You
see,
just told me it doesn't matter to you how I live.
it's not my, it's not, well, I did, it does matter. Like if you were, if I, you were like, hey, well, after the show today, I'm going to start slamming hard meth. I'd probably be like, Alan, don't do it, man. It will destroy your health. I really think that's bad for you. So I do care how you live. I don't mean it on that level, but I mean, if you're not hurting yourself and hurting other people and you,
Dude, I'm hurting myself by not trusting Jesus, right? Because if I don't, then how do I have a relationship with God that you supposedly think is the only way to have eternal life? And so without that, I'm going to suffer some eternal consequence.
I think you're mistaking me for a Protestant or maybe even a Roman Catholic.
So explain to me your understanding of preaching the gospel then. What is that?
That okay, I'll try to give you a short summary answer there that makes sense. For us, the idea that God became a human being is the salvation of humanity. Um, it is sanctification of human experience and human life. And our objective is not to do enough to make God happy with us, and it's not to accept some set of propositions so that God doesn't send us to hell even though we deserve it. Our objective is to live in a way that continually elevates ourselves into the very essence nature of God it's himself. Um, and so what that means for me is I want to be the best person I could possibly be. I want to live in the best way I could possibly live. Now, the good message or the good message that the apostles preached, if we're and we're you're asking a Christian question, so I'll give you a Christian answer. Okay, from an Orthodox perspective, the good message was that God became man and that he through his whole life, not just dying on the cross and raising from the dead, but the entire process um, gives us all hope of achieving that in our own self to become what he is by nature through grace. Um, so what would I hope for you is that you would do the same thing. Now the difference is in the Protestant worldview, the idea is I could sit here and say, well, you if you haven't said that you believe, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, then you have no hope of salvation. But if you said those things, you've got all the hope in the world. Um, that's the way they sort of see that. For me, I would see if you are, I mean, we just read it in our gospel readings where in the scripture Christ said a man asked his son to go to the field, and one son said, I will not go. But he went and did the work. And the other son said, I will go, and didn't. He said, who did the will of the Father? And they said, the one who went. And so let's just say, I'm the worst scumbag Christian that ever lived. I'm stealing from my grandma. I'm doing all the evilest things you can think of. But yet I say, I believe in Jesus Christ. He's my Lord and Savior. I believe in, okay. And you say, I don't believe in God. I don't see the evidence of it. I feel like I've struggled with it my whole life. But you love your neighbor. You give to the poor. You try to be an honest person. In my view, you are more a Christian than I am, even though you may not like the label Christian. So this is going back again to the idea of if it's not what we believe, it's what we practice. It's not what we say we believe, it's how we live. And so I don't need to make you into anything. I don't really need to, and I don't need to judge you. I don't know what God will do for you. I don't know.
So faith has no bearing in your belief system.
It does, because if you were to ask me things like, do you believe, participating in the life of the church is changing you spiritually? I'd say yes, I do believe it is. I believe that the things that the church gives us to participate in.
Well, I mean salvific faith, bro. I mean salvific faith.
You're talking about this
I'm talking about, yeah, what it takes to have a relationship with this God that you're not even sure exists. Yes. You're saying
yeah,
faith.
I mean, I think to some degree faith is, no, I think it is, but at the same time, you're not going to like this, but I think you have faith as well. You just don't admit that you have faith a lot. And you're acting on faith. Like when you're doing good for other people in spite of what's good for you, you are doing that because it's a good thing and you believe that the good is worth doing. That's a faith. That's an act of faith. That doesn't mean you believe in God. I'm not saying you secretly believe in God. I'm saying in that moment you believe in the good. And even if that's a small belief in the good and a small act in
All right.
favor of that,
So
that's faith. It's still faith.
faith doesn't require an object. It's just faith. And the Protestant view, faith requires an object, Christ. In your view, faith doesn't require an object. You just, if you have faith and you do something good with it, and that's it. You have a relationship with God. Really? That's it?
Well, yeah, it sounds like it. I mean, if you think about it, really, if I claim to have, okay, hear me out, give me room to lay this thought out. If I claim I believe in God, I say I believe that there's a will and purpose guiding the universe, that things exist for a reason, that my life is here. I'm living this life for a reason and a purpose, but yet I do all manner of things that are opposite of that statement. That is not faith in the Orthodox Christian sense. But if I live and do the things that are right, if I live as though God exists, that's faith in the Orthodox sense. We don't hold to that sola fide, you just acknowledge propositions. It's what James says in James 2. If a man says, I believe in God, and he has no actions to verify that, how does that faith save him? Okay. So maybe that's another thing we should talk about, because when I'm talking about faith, I'm not talking about this. I believe this happened one time. That's not faith is acting. Faith is acting upon something, but you're not acting because you have been convinced of it. You not act on it, but because you're threatened into it. You act upon it because you believe it is the good thing to do. You believe it is the right thing to do. And when this is what I believe. I'm not saying this is a matter of philosophical or whatever truth, but I believe this. I believe that when you are acting in according to that which is good, you are acting according to the nature of God. And in that moment, you're participating in what I believe to be God.
Huh. All right. So, as an atheist who doesn't believe in God, I'm in the same status with you, who also is unsure whether God even exists or not, simply because we both do good acts out of what you call faith, even though I don't really understand what you mean by that, really. But is that what we're at? Is that what you're saying?
Well, maybe. If I didn't know the force of gravity exists, and if I stepped off of a building, it'd still affect me. If something's real, then it has an effect whether I believe it's real or not. And if I say I believe that God is good and that God is purpose and meaning and all those things that I've been saying that I think God is, then I would have to say that acting in accordance with that is acting and participating in that, whether a person believes that the ultimate reality of that is true or not. In other words, I believe if I act selflessly, if I act with love, if I act with compassion, if I act with kindness, if I act in ways that our faith describe Christ, if I act that way, if I live that way, then I'm participating in that good, whether I say that I am trying to believe in God or not. I'm acting as though I do. And
All
if
right.
I say I believe in God and do the opposite, then I'm lying and the truth is not in me. That's actually what it says in some of these places in this Bible that people claim to believe.
So, all right. So I'm starting to get a grasp on what differentiates Orthodox Eastern Orthodox Christianity from Protestant Christianity. But I guess now I'm confused about what distinguishes you from Roman Catholicism.
It's the same thing, but from a different perspective. So brief lesson here. Allow me to bore you with theology and history.
Okay.
Okay,
We're
so
all looking forward to being bored.
yeah, I'm sure all the people tuned in to hear a lesson on Catholic theology. But anyway, so I'm going to oversimplify and probably misstate. And if you're Catholic and you're listening, I love you guys. You guys got to do a lot of good as well for the most part. Um, But St. Augustine had this theory, and the theory was that we sort of accumulate these negative merits in the bad things we do, sort of like a sort of Christian version of karma. I lie, I cuss, I've run over babies, whatever. It sort of accumulates. And his theory was that even though Christ, and this whole thing is Western, by the way, even though Christ's work had saved us, that we still needed to do things to balance the negative merit. So he sort of had this idea. It was his way of sort of promoting good works. I think he's wrong there, and the Orthodox Church thinks he's wrong there. But that was his theory. You need to do good things to balance out the bad things you've done. So in the Western Catholic Church, that took precedence, and so a lot of their theology was about merits, about doing good things to counteract the bad things, and then you introduce things like indulgences, and if you go venerate, this tomb 3 times or wear this ribbon around your neck, it will, and so that's some things that kind of emerged in the West. Well, the Protestant Reformation said no. The work of Christ alone is enough. And if we just accept his work, then we don't have to do any works. And Eastern Orthodoxy said, we have no clue what you're talking about. That is not something it's never been a discussion in the East. It's never been a part of our concept. So the Roman Catholics believe in grace that is given through meritorious acts, and the Protestants believe the opposite. And we believe that whole idea is misguided from the start. That was probably confusing, but it's a big subject, and I tried to reduce it down to, but essentially that is the truth. What I'm saying about how we believe in participating in the life of God is how we see it in the Orthodox East. And when you start talking about doing good and weighing out merits, that is more Western and Latin. Protestants and Catholics are far more alike than they realize.
So the Eastern Orthodox sounds to me like you're basically humanists that like a lot of rituals. Whereas
I wouldn't necessarily hate that definition, because I would say we are ultimately a humanist religion, and we do see great merit in ritual. And so I don't know that that's a terrible definition.
no, it sounds about right. Whereas I'm a humanist that just doesn't ever want to do a ritual again because they don't make any sense to me because they're all about a God that, well, I don't believe exists and you aren't sure exists. So, I mean, I suppose at the end of the day, you and I are pretty much in the same ballpark, except you like going to church and doing rituals, and I pretty much like doing my Sunday watching TV or whatever. I mean, I mean, let's face
No,
it, that's
I
where
get
we're
what you're
at. Like,
saying, and maybe to a certain degree, okay, and there's just a whole topic there. I mean, we have people in our church that we would call saints or holy people that went out, lived in the desert alone. We have people that did all sorts of different life devotions, and so um, just because I like the rich, I do like the ritual. I do like the rhythm of it. I like this weekend we celebrate Pascha in the Eastern Orthodox Church. Once every 7 years, we celebrate Pascha the same weekend the Western Church celebrates Easter. So this is a weird time for us, but I like it. I like the event. I mean, we stay up all night. We're up, having an Orthodox party at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and we're allowed to drink and smoke. So it really is a party. So, and we do that after we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus Christ, and it's fun. It's fun, and it's got a depth to it. So I do like that. But you said humanist, and I said that last week, and I think our religion is the ultimate humanist religion, because we believe that the divination is the word we'd use of humanity, that there's a God likeness to being a human being. And here's something else we would say. We would say that salvation isn't becoming something other than human. Salvation is actually becoming as much human as possible. And that we really focus more on not being inhuman is the thing we want to avoid. We want to be human. We're supposed to be human. Things that are human about us are things that if you did believe in God, you would have to say those are the things that God would have wanted us to have because we're human because of his will. So we are a humanist sort of religion.
Yeah. So I
With
mean,
the belief in God. So humanism with a belief in God.
yeah, I mean, so it's starting to sound more and more like our views align. It's just you are choosing to add God to the element, and I don't need God for it. So,
And
I
maybe
mean,
not, maybe not, maybe
it's
not.
it's starting to sound like atheism wins only because we don't need the added element of God, which you don't even know for certain exists. So it's just a weird religion, man. And more I hear you talk about it, I'm just like, why are they adding God to this mix and the rituals? It's just so weird. Like it's like you can just live without all that mess and just do the same thing I'm doing and just not have to like lose your Sunday mornings. But you said you enjoy it. So
Do you like things like Christmas and Thanksgiving?
I don't care about the holidays or the
I'm not
religion.
from religion. I'm not trying to trap you. It's not a trap. But I mean, what about Thanksgiving? We'll do it's
I mean, if you're asking me, do I like parts of Thanksgiving? Sure, I like the fact that we eat great turkey on Thanksgiving and stuffing. But I
okay.
at any day of the year, it's not like ever since I've been an atheist, like those holidays literally have no special bearing to me whatsoever. In fact, I have found them both to be excessively uncomfortable because it's like a time you're supposed to gather with family. And so I go and gather with my family and I got to hear these god awful sermons and these messages and everybody thanking God for this and that and praising Jesus and going through these prayers and I'm just like, "Oh my God." So for me, they've become torturous. Like I could do without them completely and utterly do without them.
And see that's the difference. And I completely enjoy them and they're wonderful experiences. So it seems like you've lost something.
No, I haven't lost anything. I've literally stopped believing in something that I would say doesn't exist, and you would say you're not sure exists. And actually, I think I would say the same thing. I'm not sure exists because as an atheist, I'm not making a declaration. I'm simply saying I have no reason to believe it exists. See, in my opinion, contrary to what you were saying earlier, atheism is not a belief. It is a simple recognition that I have no reason to believe. That's the difference. Like, I don't have a reason to believe something. Therefore, it's not a belief system. It's just, I have no reason to believe this. So why should I believe it? You, on the other hand, believe something that you have no reason to believe either. You just believe it.
I read an essay several years ago I've mentioned this guy several times. His name's Clark Strand. If you've not read his stuff, I think you'd appreciate it. He's definitely not a theist. He's a more of a Buddhist, spiritual kind of guy, but more of a Buddhist. Um, and he was writing the essay about this spiritual but not religious group, and he made a point that stuck with me. And at that point in time, I was really looking seriously into that sort of form of religion or spiritual experience. And I was still saying things like, I don't like religion, I'm spiritual, but not. And his point was, when people who are spiritual but not religious die, he said that there's no little old ladies to bring casseroles to the house, and there's no all the little nuances that come along with these communal experiences. And I'm butchering a very eloquent point he seemed to make. And he said, and he's not trying to make anybody a Christian because that's not what he is. But his point was, and it resonated with me, that yes, religion can be taxing and boring, and particularly American forms of religion can be fairly tedious. I'm just being honest. But there's also something about, the church I go to is not 50 or 100 years old. It's a couple thousand years old. And it incorporates things into it that's much older even than that. And things like certain breads that are baked on certain occasions and certain traditions that the kids look forward to and ways that we interact. When my wife and I were married, we were married with this certain ceremony and this event. And, you know, um, you know, every year on our birthdays or names days, we sing, the church sings, God grant you many. It's just, and I'm not trying to hard sell you, but I'm trying to show you maybe there's an aspect to this religious life that isn't tedious and terrible. and particularly when it can have a really deep root and connect us to human experience for thousands of years.
Yeah, I mean, I get all that, William. But the problem is I'm trying to communicate is the only reason you feel like you would miss them is because you had them to begin with. If you never encountered those traditions, you would have other ones that have nothing to do with Christianity. So you only have this idea in your head because it's what you grew up with or what you were entrenched with or what you were taught later in life with. It doesn't matter, same difference. But you have these traditions. But bro, if you never had them, you wouldn't miss them. We only miss things that we experienced. So I mean, while you have no real reason to try to bring me into Christianity, because from what I understand from today's session, goodness gracious, I might as well be a Christian. I'm as good with God as you are because I apparently have some sort of faith you're talking about. So, sure, you have no reason to even try to convince me of anything. Me, on the other hand, I'm like, hey, dude, I'm here to tell you from a Christian who's lived with tradition and life's better over here without the rituals and the God and the bunny rabbits and the imaginations of an invisible friend you pray to. Like, so I actually do have a very high motivation to tell you life's better over here. So I guess we are on different sides of the fence, whereas what we think is worth convincing the other person for. But obviously we didn't get to the chapter, but that's okay because this was an important conversation, and I really felt like we needed to have it. I'm glad we did it, and it was fine. We'll talk about the chapter next week. That's fine. But I want to read you just a quick paragraph, only because I'm very interested in your response to it because one of the things you said last week, in addition to everything we talked about tonight, was um, that you are not hoping for heaven the way traditionally is heaven, but a relationship with God of some sort. That you're going to have this thing with God. You're going to have this ethereal experience of some sort. I don't know how you meant it or what, but that's the way you kind of said it. That it was just like a thing with God you're going to have. It's the best I can recall how you said it. And of course, when I was a Christian, I would have, at the end of my stage as a Christian, I would have by that point already equated heaven with God. I thought they were synonymous in the Bible. So, what good is heaven without God was basically my idea. So, going to heaven wasn't so much of a place, but it was a relationship, and it was just used metaphorically to describe God. So, even though this paragraph may use the term heaven, I would like you to think in terms of God instead of a place. Yeah, if that's all right. So I want to read this and I just want you to tell me where you differ from it and where you're similar to it. And just we'll end this night with that and then I'll take questions. So if you have questions, people who are listening, throw them in the queue here in the chat and I'll get to them right after this. So here it is, William. Hope. Hope is why it is difficult to leave Christianity. Hope in what's to come, or rather, fear of missing out on what's to come should you abandon your faith. Revelation 21:4 describes the hope of the new heaven and new earth. It says this: God will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning or crying or pain. That is the hope that keeps us trapped. And for those who believe Revelation 21 was fulfilled already, as I did as a Christian, the point to carry forward here is that you still believe that God has something better in store for you after death, something that you are still anticipating and hoping for. Christianity is essentially rooted in the anticipation of promises that will be fulfilled one day, whereby the surety of these promises of these fulfilled promises are based on the belief that God fulfilled all of his previous promises, which are only recorded in the stories of the Bible. Ultimately, the fulfillment of all the promises amounts to being in the presence of God in heaven for eternity. Thoughts?
I would start by saying your thoughts, when you were a Christian was probably close to Orthodox views about heaven. Heaven being God. Um, so I think that's probably right. Here's another weird one, and also hell being the presence of God, and the idea being
I
that
also agree with that. Yeah.
yeah, the idea being that if you are a person who is selfish, hateful, whatever, and you're in the presence of something that's perfect, it's not very pleasant. But if you become and that's the whole thing about aligning our mythology, our mysticism is that if you become like God, then when you're in the presence of God eternally, then that's heaven. You're perfect. Okay. Um, the idea of give me your question in a way. I think I may have lost the actual question there. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I more so wasn't a question, just your thoughts on
Mhm.
those statements. So the last, I'll just read the very last sentence because that's kind of the summary of the whole thing.
Okay.
I want to know your thought on. Ultimately, the fulfillment of all the promises amounts to being in the presence of God in heaven for eternity.
Yeah, I knew I wanted to say, and so with a addendum to that, we would teach that heaven is accessible in the present if we live in that reality in the present. Now, what I mean by that is if I accept the will of God and accept the nature of God and I live according to the nature of what is good and true and what is beautiful now, I'm already living in a sort of state of heaven. And if I live in a state that's contrary to that, then I'm already living in a state of hell. And I think in some regards, that is something that people can relate to as tangible. And it's more important, I think, right now, because I don't, I have, hopefully, I won't find out in the next 5 minutes what heaven and hell are like, but I will have to live for the next 5 minutes. So I want to live in a way that affects the reality now. And I don't think that is a personal thing, but I think that also aligns with the Orthodox view of heaven and hell is it's let's don't focus on what will happen a million years from now. How are we living now and how are we experiencing reality now? And are we aligning with heaven now? Are we aligning with hell now? Are we are uh, so yeah, I think it's a reality now that can be accessed.
Okay,
Um,
all right, but so uh, I thought I heard you say in the last episode, so I apologize if I misheard you, but it sounded like you said you're not living in hopes to go to a place called heaven at all, but now it sounds like you're saying there is a place called heaven that you hope to go to.
no, you're I mean, not in the sense. No, you what you we were talking about like I'm going to go to this place and live there, and that place is heaven. No, the reality of God, the the reality of this ultimate truth and this ultimate good is the more I live that in my life, the closer I become to living in heaven, in the present. And eventually my present should be, if I'm correct, my present tense should be the presence of God in a heavenly way. And if I'm correct, if I don't do that and I fail to develop the things that God would have me develop in my life, then it's possible that I live and experience that is hell. Um, so not going somewhere, but experiencing a reality of something that we call God. So yes, not going somewhere, but
Okay.
experiencing a reality.
All right. So I just got to say, that sounds a lot like preterism, dude. Like full
And so
preterism in a nutshell is exactly what you just described because that would have been my view as a full preterist.
with the exception that we do feel that there is a terminal uh, point, there's a terminal point in which time, as we experience it now, is no more.
For
Um,
what purpose? Is there going to be a heaven that's going to be created at that point that you go to?
well, and this is a matter of Christian theology, but the idea would be that if God is good and perfect, then evil can't be eternal. Evil has to find a conclusion and an end. It has to be resolved. And so while we can experience the good, while we can experience that reality now, and we should be, there comes has to come a point in history where if there is a good God, that he would not allow evil things to continue perpetually forever. And the idea being that, and this is theological, I get it, I'm not, but the question is what it is. So the ideal being if he is good and his nature is good, that he couldn't tolerate evil things to continue on forever. They'd
All
have to
right,
stop.
we have to end at some point tonight. This is a good stopping point. So I would just say there was a lot of ifs in there. I also don't, we'll have to talk about this in another episode because I don't see any reason why evil can't perpetually exist. I think that's a presupposition or presumption. Why can't it exist forever with a good God? I don't see any reason for that. And then there was also the if God, if God, if God. Well, I mean, if God, you don't even know if there's a God. So why?
I'm trying to give you room to be able to acknowledge my point without having to sign off on it being true.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, yeah,
That's fair. Well, and like I said, we have to talk because the
sure.
whole thing, because already like the whole thing about evil not being allowed to exist forever is a big hinge pin for people regarding atheism. So that's obviously something I don't even know. It might actually be a chapter. I can't remember in your book, but I know that that's a big deal. Oh, how can you just let evil to go on forever? It's got to end at some point. Well, no, it doesn't have to end at some point. It's going to be my contention. Why does it have to end at some point? Why does it have to have any reason? Why do we even have to call it something? Like it is what it is. It's just the way life is. So we'll talk about all those things, but that was a good ending. I think it's fine. We can't talk forever, but boy, do I have fun talking to you, dude, because we could go. This is just fun. But the more we talk, like it's amazing. I'm getting we're getting closer to our understanding of each other, which is cool. Like at least we could both say we're humanists now. That's cool. That's really cool. All right, so questions. Let's deal with these. For those of you who are already in here, thank you for finding us. Really appreciate it because we've made it hard as hell to find us every single week.
Right. Find this if you can.
But the fact that you've tried is amazing. We appreciate it. But again, if anybody knows how to fix this problem, that every time I try to connect to the YouTube I've created, it's just not working. Please reach me out to me and help me out. All right. Homemaker Calling says, how does William know he has a spirit?
How do I know that I have a spirit? Because and I can answer this, and you may notice I typically do answer questions from fairly different perspectives. I'm going to choose a scientific perspective here because there's no material uh, answer for what consciousness is. Um, I'm conscious, and that to me is the spirit that I have. So I know it because I'm a conscious person, because I understood that question and can respond to it. I know that I have a spirit.
Okay. Another question from Homemaker Calling. I've never had a single prayer answered in my life. How does this mean I lack faith?
I don't know that it does. That question implies that the idea of faith, that faith is sort of like the force in Star Wars, and if you use it correctly, you get the things you want. For me, faith is not the same thing. Faith to me is aligning myself with reality and acting on what I think is the best good. It's faith. If you catch that, for me, is acting as though good exists, not God, good.
Okay. So I guess a follow-up question to that, also from the page here is, um, so if I'm saved or I'm saved, right? This person believes that. So, why are my prayers not answered? And what makes you think oh, never mind. That's a different question. Why are my prayers not answered?
So the question was, if they're saved, why are their prayers not
Yeah.
answered?
Yeah.
Um, allow me to give you a possible scenario because I don't know enough to speak always for God. Um, my son sometimes asks me for things that are unhealthy for him, like he'd like an extra glass of chocolate milk before he goes to bed, um, or he may ask I may ask him to allow a doctor to give him a shot or to do something painful to him. In both of those instances, I'm acting in his best interest, though from his perspective, it may seem as I'm being mean to him. There's times I punish him for bad behavior, and I do so because I want him to be a good person. So my point being is I don't know, and I would be remiss to say I know why God does things, but it's possible that someone could, out of love, not give you what you're asking for.
And I mean that would be a fair statement. Sure, why not? Um, because they love you and they think they know what's better for you, right? So I get that. All right, cool. Well, there are no more actual questions for us per se. So once again, we are ending at a good time. William, is there anything you would like to add, or feel free to finish out the conversation? I'll give you the last word because I want you to have that opportunity.
Sure, and this may sound strange, but if you're watching this and you do happen to be Roman Catholic, I probably butchered some of your theology tonight. I don't agree with it, but I probably could have done a much better job of talking about it. So I don't want to offend people. I did my best with the topic, so please don't hate me. If you disagree with me, shoot us some comments, and I'll be glad to correct myself. So sorry if I butchered your theology.
Dude, it's all good because you butcher atheism every week. So
Yeah,
we're
well,
I'm sure they can be as forgiving as me. Anyway, dude, as always, it's a blast
should
to
call
have
me
you.
Bill the Butcher.
Bill the Butcher. Oh, geez, this is too much fun. Bro, thank you again for coming on my show. This has been a lot of fun. I can't wait till next week. So everybody listen in next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Once again, we continue the show, and hopefully next week we'll actually get to the chapter that we intended to talk about. So
All right,
join us next week, William. Thank you, my friend. Have a great week, buddy.
all right, sir. We'll